I should be cautious, ma'am. I should be cautious, and I will tell you the reason why. Even at my age, and I know it will continue, I have frequently said the argument over religion has been the most severe of my entire life. Why? Perhaps because I am recognized as the author of the Statute of Virginia for religious freedom. And therefore, I will assure you that I have not readily or easily forgotten that 31 years ago, before our revolution, we were not only governed by one particular royal family, generation after generation, we were not only governed by their particular parliament, one half of which is hereditary as well, we were also governed by their particular church. And therefore, in the colony of Virginia and the majority of our sister colonies, despite your religious opinion and the growing number of dissenters, we still had to pay a tax to the support of the Church of England. Our tithing was required by us all. And despite the diversity of religious opinion in Virginia, all of us had to attend the Church of England at least 12 Sundays a year. Now, if we ignored these laws, we were fined. And if we failed to pay the fine, then we were thrown into jail. In fact, I remember before the Revolution, the jails in Virginia were filled with Baptists. Oh, well, yes, as you know, they first and foremost refused to be told how to worship, when to worship, and with whom to worship, and well, had they not a point? A point indeed shared by the growing number of dissenters in the colony of Virginia. In fact, Mr. Patrick Henry and myself stood in support of the Baptists, that they might worship freely. Even a committee for religion was formed in the House of Burgesses. Upon it, Mr. Henry, myself, Mr. George Witt, the brothers Lee. So therefore, when we proceeded with our revolution, our cause was not only to break with the civil authority of England, but as well to break with the ecclesiastical authority of England. And that was the purpose of my Statute of Virginia for religious freedom. And I doubt that an individual here to read it would deny its precepts, which is simply that each and every one of us have a right to carry our communion with our Maker as we choose, and that government must not make any law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the freedom for religion. That is the purpose of a letter that I wrote to a Baptist preacher in Danbury, Connecticut, one of many that I encountered when I went to my desk in the President's office the day after my inauguration. All of the divines in this nation worried about what they had read in the newspapers and through the purports of the Federalists that I would burn all Bibles. All of them worried, are they still free to worship as they choose? I wrote to each and every one of them, reassuring them that they were as free as they have ever been as an American citizen to carry their communion. That man has never been more free to worship as he should choose than he is now as a citizen of the United States, and particularly to this Baptist preacher, that no one more than myself would desire to see a great wall of separation be built between church and state. So hence, if you will, my caution. I have rarely written a separation of church and state. I am not in favor of a separation of religion from our lives, from the lives of those we elect to office, no, but I am decidedly in favor of a separation between the ecclesiastical laws and the civil authority, allowing for more freedom for the civil authority to attend to its duty. For the only duty of government and its laws is to protect us from injury by one another, otherwise to keep us free to pursue our own industry and our own improvement. And that improvement, the most successful, when the people are free to worship as they choose, and the ecclesiastical laws thereby free to attend to their only purpose and duty, the administration of the soul. So, if you will, I think it may be a question of semantics, and I hope not that we might mispronounce it or otherwise become confused. And if we do, then let us continue to reread our First Amendment, let alone that which provided its impetus, the Statute of Virginia for religious freedom. Oh, yes.
As a grade school teacher, I'm wondering if you might indulge me with a few remarks on American hero and a close friend of yours, Mr. Meriwether Lewis.
Oh.
In the papers, this is pretty recent news, I would guess, current events.
Yes, it certainly is, sir. I thank you for bringing up the subject. The gentleman has put forth a question relative to our hero, certainly my good friend and my kinsman and former secretary in the President's House, Captain of our Armies, Meriwether Lewis. No one could be more delightful in reading the end of last September of his successful return to St. Louis, and as well the safe and successful return of the entire Corps of Discovery, save, if you will, the loss of one life, Sergeant Floyd, which occurred within the first year of that expedition through natural causes, I might say. But otherwise, can you imagine not having heard a word from the expedition as of September 1805? A year, little more than a year later, I finally hear word that they had safely returned, and had the opportunity last 28th of December, last year, '06, to greet Captain Lewis in the President's house and to enjoy many repasts for the few days that he came to visit. I find his accomplishment remarkable. It does not deter in me nor deny what I have ever held to be his great example of virtue and perseverance. He has ever been, in my mind, a man of undaunted courage. And having, overseen his life from the time I remember him, the news of his birth, born during August of 1774, when I was quite an active burgess in Williamsburg. I became very interested in my cousin and his family, seated the further west out on the frontier, and the more so when his father, Colonel William Lewis, died before the Revolution was over. It was at that time that I stood charge over his upbringing, providing him the opportunity for an education. So having invited him to be my secretary in the President's House, I think he's shown his own example of self-reliance and the delegation of power by suggesting his own former commander, Lieutenant William Clark, to be the co-commander of that expedition. So, if you will, that may be somewhat of a concise reference, perhaps only amended by the fact that I wish I myself had been upon the expedition. From what I have heard of their accounts, I doubt I would have ever wanted to return. I would have still, I imagine, be standing there gawking at what they describe as these fantastic stony mountains. If you will, the lady.
Mr. President, do you have any thoughts on women in government, particularly women in the State House?
The lady has asked me if I have any particular opinions and thoughts upon women in government, particularly in the State House. Next question. Why? Why is my concern and curiosity? Why would any lady want to dirty her delicate digits with an attention to politics? It is, madam, admittedly, a gruesome and onerous duty. Oh, I mentioned earlier, it must be pursued and persevered. It is the art of compromise and resolution. But it has long been held in the male domain. And though I do not deny a lady to be interested, as certainly Mrs. Adams is, many of my own family, and the wives of many of our public servants and administrators. And this but natural. It follows an ancient wisdom, purported, I think, best by Aristotle, millennium ago, who said whenever the man considers himself too much to be head of the household, he should reflect a moment that the lady is indeed the neck upon which his head is turned in any direction, she so chooses. I will readily admit that after nearly 40 years in public service, I have never known a concern to be raised on the floor of legislation that has not already been raised on the floor of our own homes. So therefore, my concern. I said earlier, and I'm a great believer in the principle that a child of 14 cannot wear the same clothes at the age of 40. That our laws and our institutions should grow as we grow as a people. We are a different people already now, 31 years after our declaration, and we were a different people then than we were 31 years before. And so it will continue, not in naturam habilis, as we become the more American every day. So if it becomes the general advice of the citizenry, their will and desire, so it must be fulfilled.